And now,
it's 10 a.m.
let's just get down to it.
And it's time for your sports fix.
Strap yourselves in, folks.
From two guys who have covered the teams you're passionate about for years.
We are professionals.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. Jake Scott, Ben Anderson, thank you for making us a part of your Tuesday. Ben off for one more day as his vacation continues. So all you droves of Ben Anderson fans, fear not, he will make his triumphant return coming up tomorrow. So we certainly look forward to that. I hope everybody listening had a fantastic Memorial Day. Hopefully everybody took a moment to remember the loved ones that they lost, and of course the people who paid the biggest price in service of this great country. So hopefully everybody took a minute to enjoy. My wife left town on business yesterday, so I took the opportunity to celebrate with pork chops because my wife does not eat pork chops, and they were incredible. Absolutely incredible. I had no idea how much I missed pork chops. But, yeah, it was fun. Outside, the weather was beautiful. Hopefully, if you were traveling over the long weekend, everything went great. Now, of course, back to normal. So coming up here momentarily, we're going to talk to the one, the only Jeremiah Jensen. Very much looking forward to that. It's going to be a busy day on the show at 11:05. So top of the 11 o'clock hour, we're going to talk to Eddie White, who is the host of Pacers Overtime. We'll talk a little Eastern Conference Final. And then at 11:30, our buddy, the coach, Tim Lacombe, is going to jump on the show. So we've got an action-packed show for you. Ben back tomorrow, but right now let's welcome him in. Of course, you see him right there on KSL Channel 5. You hear him every afternoon on JJ and Alex right here on the KSL Sports Zone. He is our good buddy, Jeremiah Jensen. What is happening, JJ? How was the long weekend, buddy?
Jake, the long weekend was great. I worked on the weekend, of course, so
yes.
It's always long. But I also had a good time, so,
good.
Love the holidays.
Yeah, absolutely. I did not get out of town, but okay, you're a parent, and I was ranting about this before the show. I find it offensive when our love for our children is leveraged against us. And we did a little staycation downtown on Friday night, and we went to like an arcade. Nice. I'm not here to give anybody free advertising, but an arcade downtown, right? Yeah. It costs like $60 to charge up one of those cards.
Uh-huh.
And it lasted a half an hour, maybe 45. And I have a 7 and a 4-year-old, so it's not like we're moving all that fast. You know what I'm saying? We come out of the thing with a tiny stuffy for the 7-year-old, a little octopus she named Smiley, and a bouncy ball for my 4-year-old. And I just couldn't help but thinking, like, this is an absolute racket. They are absolutely preying on my love for my children.
Wait till they get older. So, Jake, I've got 4. And I recently took them to the movie. Again, I'm not going to give away the establishment, like you said. I'm not going to give anybody free advertising, but a very fine establishment here that does the movies / the games and everything else, bowling, whatever. Went and watched the movie. It was great. Had a good time. But the damage at the end was $150. What are we doing? Like, you can't go out and take your family anywhere right now under $150. It's just, there's just no way to do it. And we talk about, of course, to bring it back to sports is, if you want to take your family to a baseball game, $150, $200 at least, right? Yeah. So it's just kind of how the economy is right now. But you're right. There is a racket there, and they all know we've got these kids that need to be entertained, and people are taking good advantage of it.
And not to be too much old man shakes fist at clouds. She had it for.
You're good at that, though.
that's my role.
You got that down.
But not 24 hours later, JJ. I'm not kidding. My 7-year-old goes, Smiley already has a hole in her. And there's a little hole. Not 24 hours. I was like, okay, all right. So that's why I'm angry this morning, Jeremiah. Thanks for.
You're totally justified, and I'm telling you, as a fellow parent of young kids, I've been in your shoes. It sucks.
All right. To change gears, and I want to get I have lots of stuff to talk to you about, but I want to get the serious stuff out of the way. What was your reaction to the Retzlaff news last week? And what do you think the next steps are? And, just kind of talking cut and dry stuff. We don't need to dive into the muck.
Well, I certainly don't want to do that. And that's a tricky thing to do. And I'll leave that to professionals that understand all the legal stuff. That's not me. But I will tell you that when the news came down the other day, I was absolutely shocked. Jake, this is one of the biggest bombshell, news sports drops that I remember, over the last few years, where you have a starting quarterback at BYU that is being accused of these things. When have we ever had a situation like this? When it's quarterback, it's magnified 20 times because that is the face of your program. And at BYU, to have somebody who's the face of the program being accused of these things in a civil lawsuit was just absolutely shocking. Now, obviously, you're looking at a legal situation here, a civil lawsuit. We've talked about it at length on our show, and it's something you want to be careful with because you want to respect the victim here, the alleged victim, and you also want to respect the process. So I'm certainly doing that as I'm talking about this. But the elephant in the room is pretty clear, Jake, is the question that BYU fans are asking, okay, this is bad, but what does this mean for Jake's status playing football this fall? If you're a BYU fan, you care about your Cougars. You care about what's going to happen with this football team in the fall. And this is a team that was going to be probably top 15 ranked in the country. This is a team that was going to have a chance to win a Big 12 championship or at least contend for one. And now all of that is completely in flux because of this legal matter, this civil lawsuit that has been filed. And it's hard to talk about it because you understand it's bigger than football. It's much bigger than football, but you also can't ignore the fact that this does impact football. And being on sports talk radio and working in sports broadcasting, that is something that you have to talk about and address, and it's a big concern. And what's next in all this? BYU is going to have to make a decision about his status, and they're going to have to do their due diligence. They're probably going to have to do their own investigation, Jake, and I don't know how long that's going to take them, but they can't take long because it needs to be pretty quick to make a decision on this because they don't want this lingering throughout the summer. We're, 2 months away from camp, 2 months away, and they're not sure what the status is of their starting quarterback. They're going to have to figure this out quickly, and I'm sure they're vetting the situation, and they're going to make a swift decision on what to do moving forward. But that decision has to be made quickly. And not only do you not want this to linger into the offseason because it becomes a distraction. Like we're having a golf outing with the BYU football team at the end of June where we're going to be asking them questions. We're going to be doing interviews with players. How do you talk about anything before you talk about what's the status of your quarterback? How are you going to handle this? Instead of the talk being about a top 15 team, Jake, this is going to be a talk about Jake Retzlaff in this situation. And that's not a distraction that Kalani Sitake and the program wants. So they're going to have to make a decision on Jake's status here pretty quickly. I'm sure they'll do their own investigation and figure that out. I think that's the next step. Is Jake going to play this fall in regards to BYU football? On the legal side of things, that's not something I can answer because I don't understand all that, but I do know from a football side of things, from a PR side of things, all those things matter, and they need to move swiftly and make a decision so that this is something that they can get a handle on and make a decision on so we know what the status of his is moving forward so they can get on with their season.
Yeah, I think they should be making motions to get on with their season because I just don't see a way in which he plays. I mean, I don't either. I don't think it happens. So I'm sure behind the scenes they're operating delicately and thoroughly, as you indicate. But it gets wrapped up, and this does complicate things. And I hope that coaches, because BYU is so unique. Sorry, not to backtrack, but BYU is so unique because of the church's involvement, right? And it giveth and taketh in a couple of ways, right? You're a celebrity. You're gonna play in front of a packed stadium, packed house. You're gonna go on the road, and there's gonna be BYU fans everywhere. I mean, it's probably really cool. but when it comes to mistakes, all of a sudden representing the church can be consequential. And I just hope that when they're recruiting LDS and not LDS, they're very clear that that adds a level of things that doesn't exist other places.
You're absolutely right. Let me add this. Let's say that this is a defensive end at Georgia. It's probably a headline on ESPN.com for a day or two, and then everybody else moves on, right? Civil lawsuit against a defensive end at Georgia. That doesn't shock you. That doesn't surprise you. Now, civil lawsuit alleging sexual assault of the BYU quarterback and everything else that's been surrounding Jake Retzlaff, that's different. And that is something that, as I think it, and at BYU, they're going to have to handle it different. Yes, there's an honor code. I'm not going to speculate or get into that, but there's two levels to this: is how do they discipline the legal part of it, and how do they discipline the honor code part of it? And they're going to have vet that as well. So this is more complicated because it's BYU than it would be at a place, say, like Georgia or any other institution, and it's going to be handled much differently. And they're certainly going to be more aware of the optics of the situation, to your point, Jake.
All right, JJ, let's switch gears. Let's talk some NBA and start with the Jazz, and then we'll move on to the conference finals. But This is the first time I've spoken to you since the Jazz got the shaft in the lottery.
Or as I call it, the shaft.
And I'm curious, because we saw the rumors come out about Lowry and possibly the third pick being in play and eating Paul George's contract and all of that. Put your GM hat on for a second. How would you maneuver now that we found out they are not getting Cooper Flagg?
Well, yeah, so you know who you're not getting, right? You're not getting Cooper Flagg. You're not getting Dylan Harper at number 2. So now the question becomes, who are those guys after that? How much do you love Ace Bailey? What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to do to move up in the draft to get him? Do you think you have to move up to get him? So and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I think there's a tier after. I think Cooper Flagg's a tier on his own. I think Dylan Harper's a tier on his own. And then the next tier is Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe, and Trey Johnson. Not in that particular order, because I have my favorite of that 3, but that's the tier you're working with. And if you have the number 5 pick, you're going to get one of those 3 players. And now I'm not trying to gloss over the fact that they got screwed in the lottery, that it happened. You're not going to get Cooper Flagg, and you're down about that. But if you come away with one of those 3 players, I think you've got a player who has potential to be a star down the road. They all have those qualities. They're not just they don't just have one NBA skill. Like, there's not one of those guys that he just shoots threes, or he's a two-way defender, or those guys all have the ability to be star players. So you're going to get one of those guys. So then, Jake, the question becomes, which one of those 3 do you want? And if you feel like you have to move up to 3 or 4, what are you willing to give up to do that? What are you willing to take on to do that? And that's where the discussion comes in about the number 3 pick. Would Philly be willing to dangle that number 3 pick in order to get off the Paul George contract and add a star like Lauri Markkanen? If I'm Philly, I'm doing that trade. I'm doing that. I'm doing that right now. So what does that make you think, though, about the Jazz side of things? I'm not sure that's a smart move for the Jazz to do. If I were the Jazz, I would certainly get as much intel as I can on what the other teams are thinking. I would try to decide, and I'm sure they've done this. I'm not saying anything that they haven't already done. Is I would decide on of those 3 players, who do you think is the best players, and then you can make a decision about how aggressively you want to pursue getting that player that you really, really like out of that group. But if you come away with one of those 3 players at number 5 and you stay put at 5, I think you come away feeling like you got something that's going to be of benefit moving forward. And instantly that player might become the second best player on your team. If you look at all the young players they got, Jake, none of those guys are top 5 picks, right? You got Keontae George in the middle of the first round, Walker Kessler late first round. They did a masterful job last year, late in the first round, early in the second round, to get Isaiah Collier and Kyle Filipowski. And you may have missed at number 10 last year. I don't know. We'll see. The jury's out on that. But you instantly get a player that you're adding to your roster that's probably better than all those players. So that's a step in the right direction for them. But they're going to have to make that decision about which of those players they love, and we can have that conversation as well, because I think there's some really good players at that spot. So no matter what they do, they'll come out okay. But how aggressive do they want to be, and who do they really like? We'll find out.
So where I find some of this discussion interesting, Jeremiah, is, you hear general managers say bites at the apple. Part of the reason you get all these draft picks is because you want bites at the apple. I would never, if I were the Jazz, eat Paul George's contract just to move up 2 picks.
No.
But the idea of keeping the 5th and figuring out a way to get the 3rd and having 2 top 5 bites at the apple, I think that's intriguing. But the Jazz would probably have to rely on their scouting staff, right, to say how good of draft is this? How many? Because frankly, how many of these top 5 picks are going to turn out to just be average or below average? Maybe 2. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure. History says that's accurate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you give yourself 2 bites at that apple, I find that kind of intriguing. So I wonder how good of to your point, how good those players you're talking about really are.
Are the Hornets willing to talk about 4 and 5?
Yeah.
Like, how much do you love those 3 players in that tier, and how many of your assets are you willing to use to maybe get another one, like you're saying, or to move up to get the guy you really, really want? Those are going to be tough decisions. And you bring up the talent assessment. This is a big opportunity for the Jazz to show that they can do that. Because this is hard. I'm watching film of these guys, and they all have their abilities. They all have things that stand out. Which one of those is going to be the better NBA player? Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck and all of their scouts and everybody involved is going to have to make that decision. And these are huge decisions. Whoever the Jazz take in this draft at number 5 or whatever, this is an important piece in their rebuild moving forward. They got to get it right, and if they don't, they get set back. You look at all the teams in the league that have done a terrible job at this, and they can't get out of the bottom. And the idea that you want to continue tanking until you get it right, that's not going to work. I mean, just look at the teams that are doing really well right now in the league that have been at that bottom: the Thunder, the Timberwolves, the Pistons. The list goes on and on. They weren't, the Pistons obviously had their long run of struggle, but like they eventually broke out of it because they did get the right guy, or even if things didn't bounce their way. The Pistons are a good example of that. So you got to get it right, and that's going to be a big test. But who in the league do you trust more than Danny Ainge, Jake? I mean, look what he did with the Tatum situation with the Celtics.
Yep.
You win that lottery, but then you're like, you're pretty savvy. You're like, okay, everyone thinks Markelle Fultz is the best player in this draft. I think Jason Tatum is. So I can use that to my advantage. And he absolutely took advantage of the Sixers in the time where the Sixers were the team that was tanking and going through the process. So Danny Ainge has, if somebody in the league sees the number on their phone as Danny Ainge, I'm not answering the phone call because he takes advantage of people time and time again. But this is where Danny Ainge shines. That guy knows the game. He's a master scout. He watches a lot of film, and I think he'll get it right. And I'm dying to know which of those 3 players he thinks is the better player and how they decide to play it.
I think I have the answer for how the T-Wolves can get back in the Western Conference Finals. 2 words for you, Jeremiah. Joe Ingles.
Jingle and Joe.
No, I don't know what Minnesota's going to do. I think Daigneault's
cooked. It's over.
Yeah, Daigneault's a great coach for Oklahoma City. They found a way to neutralize Minnesota's star, and I don't think Finch has had an answer.
Well, look, and I think we're finally starting to realize as we're watching this Thunder team develop even in this playoffs. They're growing in this playoffs, Jake. Remember when they were not clutch and they couldn't finish? What have they done in this series? They've been very clutch, except for that Game 3, obviously. Even in that Nuggets series, they found a way to finish. This team is growing and getting better as we're watching them. And last night, to watch Shea go for 40, Jalen Williams go for 30, and Chet go for 20 and 3 blocks, like, this team is a monster. They are going to be an absolute problem for the next decade if they can keep it all together. And that's going to be a challenge. It always is. But if you're a Jazz fan, you're watching this Thunder team last night, with all those young players doing what they're doing right now, you're like, when is our window? How long is it going to take? And, you got the Spurs that are doing similar things as well. They're just farther behind in that process. But I'm watching the Thunder, Jake, and I think that's the best team in the NBA, which is crazy to say that, their best player is 26 years old, and he's under contract, and they've got all these younger guys. And I think they have this massive window of opportunity, and they built a monster in Oklahoma City. If I'm the Timberwolves, what do you do? I mean, you threw everything you had at him last night. Anthony Edwards wasn't able to get the looks he wanted to, but you got a lot of other guys. Dante DiVincenzo steps up. Na stepped up, had big games, and you gave it everything you had. And then at the end, the Thunder just made one play after another down the stretch. Like, they have an answer every single time. And so we're just watching the start of what could be the next dynasty in the NBA, Jake, and it's the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Man, I wonder, Ben has been talking about how maybe the era of dynasty is over because of the second apron and all of that. And because Oklahoma City's young and has all these good contracts, I'll be really curious to see who they start paying. Does that make any sense? And who
100%.
goes, you know? Like,
for sure.
Golden State, when they started their dynasty, right, they let Harrison Barnes go to Dallas. And that turned out to be really savvy, right? Because he was replaceable and they didn't need to give him a big contract. I'll be curious to see what Oklahoma City does with all its young players who eventually are going to get paid.
Well, you know what? Here's the weird thing, Ben may be right, but here's where I wonder if the Thunder have a backup, because they might let somebody walk or go. But you look at their draft pick stash, and they've got all these picks and all these assets and all these lingering trades. Like, they're going to continue to bring in, look at what their roster's built on now. Like Cason Wallace, a 10th pick, Jalen Williams is an 11th pick. Like, they've done a really, really good job, Jake, of drafting in that part of the first round. And they've got a ton of those picks coming up with different trades and things that they have. So maybe you're right. I think that Ben is right. That apron is something, and it's obviously, having a toll on a lot of teams around the league. But they might be built for it with the ability to bring in young draftable players to plug in some of those holes, as long as they keep their big three together, or if it becomes a big two and they add some picks, then they'll still keep the engine running. So I think that while that is a good point, they just have so many assets at a time when they're still young that they might be able to keep this thing going even if they lose a body or two.
Do you think John Halliburton's return will lift the Pacers to a 3-1 lead?
They really missed him in Game 3. I blame the 20-point collapse on the fact that he wasn't in the building.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like that circus. I mean, I'm sure he's going to have. I'm sure they've been working with him and making sure that he doesn't. They're
putting him in the suite.
Issue. Well, there you go. That's perfect. Keep him off the court. That's exactly what they need to do. Look, I love and appreciate how passionate he is as a parent, but we shouldn't be talking about a player's dad ever, and that certainly became the case. So, but the Pacers, they're looking at that series. That was a golden opportunity for them to just absolutely close the door on the Knicks, and now they've given them life. And the Knicks, our team, I think I respect their talent. You got a number 1 overall pick in Karl Anthony Towns, who's starting to feel himself, and Jalen Brunson's one of the most clutch players in the league. He is the most clutch player in the league. Like that's not a team you want to breathe life into, and they kind of did in that game. If you're the Knicks and you go to Indiana and you were down 20 in a make or break situation in a Game 3 where you're already down 2-0 after losing at home, and you have the guts and you have the savvy and you have the mettle to come back from that and win a game in their house, I think they've got a brand new confidence from that. And now all of a sudden this is a series again. Well, the Pacers' job is to shut that down and respond in Game 4 by coming out the same way they did and finishing the job. But that Pacers team's really good. I'm glad you bring up that series, because from a Jazz perspective, we're watching these teams. And it's like, okay, how do you build an NBA contender in 2025? Because there's different challenges now than there were 5-10 years ago. And everyone's done it differently. You look at the Timberwolves, got a number 1 overall pick in Anthony Edwards, who's their young star, but then they built the rest of their roster through a lot of trades. You see the Thunder, they made a massive blockbuster deal and somehow found an MVP in that deal. And then they've drafted really well. That was their model. But the Pacers have done things differently than everybody else. They've acquired mostly through trades and some free agency. So, the way they built the champion is different. So, to your point about the dynasty thing earlier, the dynasties may be dying out because of the collective bargaining agreement, and maybe the Thunder are a team that can find a title here in the next few years with this group they have. But they've shown us that there's a different way to do things, and I think that that's good for the NBA, because there's this idea that you have to do things a certain way. I don't think that's the case. I think you have to be creative, and I think you have to figure it out and find a way to do it when you don't have a number one overall pick all the time, or you don't have the ability to recruit people to Miami Beach or whatever it is, or you're not the Lakers, right? You got to be able to have a way of doing business and being able to build a contender some way. And the Pacers are showing that. But I've been really fascinated to watch that Pacers team and how they've come together. I still think they win that series, but I think they woke up the Knicks a little bit. And all of a sudden that looks like a 6 or 7 game series now.
Who's more irritating to work with, Alex Curie or Sam Farnsworth?
Who's more irritating? Who's more grumpy? I think we know the answer to that question.
Do we?
I don't think
Sam's never grumpy.
Sam can get grumpy.
Yeah,
no, that's not
true.
something in his DNA. We love Alex, but yeah, he's got his personality. So it's fun to work with both of them on a daily basis. They're a blast, and I'm really lucky that I'm surrounded by great talent, because I'm not very talented, and they all make me look really, really good. So I love those guys and love working with them. But to answer your question, I think you know the answer.
Don't sell yourself short, Jeremiah. You're carrying us all, buddy, and we appreciate you and all of your great efforts. Seriously, we'll be listening and watching. Appreciate you.
Oh, you're the best, Jake. Appreciate it. Always loved coming on.
Oh, you're the man. Thanks, Jeremiah. There you go. That's the one and only Jeremiah Jensen. Hear him every afternoon alongside Alex Curie. And, of course, catch him on KSL Channel 5. And he's right about that. TV guys don't have weekends. That's not a thing. They're always on call, making it happen. We've got to have that handsome face delivering the news, Christian. That's a thing. All right, top 3 stories of the day, KSLSports.com. Coming up next, it's Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Accessing.
This is Hans Olsen and Scotty G.
Joining us now, Ian Fitzsimmons.
Hans, Crazy Wings, George's. Did you hit it?
I didn't get to hit it, man. We ended up at the Brazos Grill. I got their chicken fried steak, but they did have these thing called the armadillo balls at the Brazos River that was really good, but it's not the Crazy Wing.
Can you go ahead and just lift hands saying they did have these things called armadillo balls, which were really good?
I feel like Chevy Chase in the movie Funny Farm.
You polish off that plate and you break the record.
Stand back, everybody. The record falls tonight.
Now there's a man who knows when he's got something good in his mouth.
On that mic drop, bam, done.
Catch Hans and Scotty weekdays from noon to 3 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.